Hey my YouTube friends, this is Dave from Old Car Garage. Happy New Year. Okay, I know, it's February, but this is my first video of 2024. And I want to apologize to my subscribers for not having any new content since the beginning of December. It was just a little burnout, needed to take a break. And also this time of year in Pennsylvania, with the wintertime, it's a bit cold. And with no heat in my garage, well, I'm not spending a whole lot of time out here working. But what I thought I'd do for my first video of the year, I thought I'd revisit the 55 Chevy. One of the earlier videos I did when I started this channel was a little bit of a walk around and drive of my 55 Chevy. If you want to see that video, I'll put a link up here so that way you can check that out. But I'm going to go over a couple things and a little bit of the history of the car and show you a couple old pictures here as well. Sit back and enjoy. I got my hot coffee here, so I'm able to put up with the cold temperatures out here today. Let's take a look at the 55 Chevy. So as you can see, I got the car currently sitting up on the lift. Just recently I've been moving some of the cars around and brought it in. And I didn't really intend to do any work on the car other than I'm going to take a little closer look at some of the things my father did back in over the years that he's owned this car. My father bought this in '77. And it had been a retired drag car from the US 30 drag strip. The car was drag raced by one of my current friends, Ed Gallagher. My father bought this in '77. I was 10 years old. So I have limited memory of the different mods that were done to this car. But I do know it was a big block 396. It had white bucket seats in it and a console that were all Chevelle. It had a posi rear. It was a 55 rear, but it had a posi chunk in it. I don't know what the gear set was, but he painted it this shade of two-tone blue, which my father liked, and had resprayed the car twice in the time that he owned it, and basically kept the same color combination. I do recall that this car had an electric fuel pump on it that was mounted back in the trunk. It had a very small steering wheel. I can't remember what it was, but I do remember it was small, my father complaining about it. It also had a disc brake setup on it. It also had fiberglass fenders that came from J.C. Whitney, which all that stuff has pretty much been removed when my father restored the car, which was back in about 1979 that my father did the restoration and put it back out onto the road. I drove the car in high school in '84 to '85, took it to a number of car shows different times, had a lot of fun with it. At that time, it had a 265 V8 in it, 3-speed on the column. Again, my father bought the car to restore it. He was reliving his teen years, so that's what he was doing, was restoring a 55 Chevy. He didn't want a drag car. But by the year of 2000, when he retired, he made it to what the current configuration is, which is a 400 small block with 4 speeds on the floor. It still has a stock rear in it. It does not have the one with the posi chunk. My father sold that long ago, unfortunately. My father had different wheels on it. I put these aluminum slots on. They are not Fenton. My nephew made me the decals because when my father had the car, originally back in '77 when he purchased it, he had Fentons on it, actual Fentons. So I kind of went for that look. So I thought I'd show you some pictures that I have that when Ed owned the car. I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on film, but a little bit during. There's the 396. You can see it from US 30 drag strip there. One of the other cool things that I got from Ed, well actually my father got when he bought the car, Ed had thrown it in there with him, was this box that has some interesting stuff, which is where the front brakes came from. So this again, there's the spindles, the rotors, and the calipers. So it says off of a 70 Impala. The engine was out of a 66 Chevelle, and the transmission, which I think was a 400, was a 67 Chevelle. It's a couple, it's a whole box of old receipts. There's from stall headers. Looks like it was something Mr. Gasket. There's the old M&R Smith, getting some parts, which is really cool for those that are local folks to York County, Pennsylvania, to see some of these old names. These great old businesses that unfortunately no longer exist. There's one from Luckenball Chevy. That was down in Spring Grove. Okay, I'm doing this one-handed. Here we had Hagee Upholstery. Looks like new carpet, $15. This was from November of '75. Here we got Winner's Transmission, if you know them. They build a lot of racing stuff. And then more stall. Looks like we got some exhaust pieces. So pretty cool thing. Got a whole box full of that stuff from back in the day. It was pretty cool that Ed had included that. And I actually had Ed go through this at one point. He took a couple of the old invoices because they were old speed shops that he used to like. So I thought that was pretty cool that I'm still sharing some of this stuff back with him then. So let's get back to taking a little closer look at the car here. I'm going to bring it down and we'll take a look under the hood. You're going to notice the car is very dusty. It has been in storage here for the last 2 months because in Pennsylvania it's wintertime. So I just actually started up for my one shop and brought it over here to put it on the lift. So what you're looking at is a 400 small block. My father did this. He had retired in 2000, and he told me that he thought the 265 was getting a bit weak. So I guess in his last bit of rebellion, he decided to go into a larger motor and go from a 3-speed to a 4-speed. But he did a few things that I'm not a fan of. One, he kept the original 55 Chevy log exhaust manifolds. I do not like how he has the alternator set up. It is really sitting far out there. That belt is very long, and when you give her some revs, it squeals something horrible. And I don't care where you adjust it, which you can see I have it adjusted pretty far out. And you can only come back in so far because the bottom of the alternator hits that manifold. It's a horrible setup. I want to do something different with that eventually. He also has the front mounts on it, which is probably the weakest type of mount to use. And you can see how close that runs to that balancer. He has a short water pump on it, which I could run a long water pump if I moved the radiator out into the 6-cylinder position and put it up front. He is running an original style radiator, which has worked just fine, actually. Now, it used to just spill its guts out everywhere. I wound up putting a catch bottle on. This came out of, I think it was like a Chrysler Cirrus, whatever they called those back in the day. I got that out of the junkyard. I think I paid $2 for it back in the day. It's got a reproduction. I guess these were Cadillac. Maybe it was Packard. I can't remember what these air cleaners were. But this is just some repop that I got cheap. And I modified it to fit in here because the wiper motor is like right almost up against that. Other things, I did change the valve covers. My father had ones that were just, I thought, ugly. They had flames on them. It just was ugly. He had everything blue anodized under the hood. You can see anything that's left that's blue anodized is the breathers. Again, log manifolds. The fuel pump is not the correct one because of the front motor mounts, so it is very tight down in there. This car has been prone to vapor lock. So right now I have a rubber hose on it, so that's a horrible thing I need to fix. And that's because of the fuel pump, because of the engine mounts. So at some point I need to change all of that. And some of this video is going to be not only just taking a look at the car, but looking at some of the things I'm thinking that I really want to make changes on. And that's one of them. I want to go to side mounts, and that way I can run that fuel pump without any issue. All the front suspension has been rebuilt, but it all is original 55 kind of stuff. Actually, in my cabinet, I have enough original stuff that my father had bought that I could rebuild this whole original front end twice over. So I have plenty of extra parts. The problem is I'm probably not going to retain that. At some point I'm probably go to disc brakes, probably 2-inch lowering spindles, because the height is another thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. I would kind of like to have that front end come down a little bit. It seems like it sits up pretty high, which is original ride height. I mean, you can put, yeah, there's a lot of space up above that tire. So not a big fan of that. The battery is still in the original location. Back when Ed was drag racing it, I think that was in the trunk. I don't have a problem with it being up front. This car is not being drag raced. One of the other things my father put metal fenders back on the car, but if I recall, I think these were 210 fenders, because I think we had to fill the holes where it said Chevrolet up here. A few other things under the hood. My father did put a small radiator shroud on there, and it probably isn't a bad idea that it's on there. He had complained he was always worried about this car overheating, but I've never had any issue with that, and I've driven this in the summer in stop-and-go traffic and not had a problem with overheating. I just used to have a problem with vapor lock. The other thing I have is I get a lot of... Yes. That was just absolutely wonderful. Okay, so take two on talking about the overheating with this car, since my light had dropped. Anyway, I have no issues with coolant overheating, but I do have issues with heat transfer to this carburetor. And I have thought about putting a spacer in there, and then there's other times where I've thought, I don't care for this setup anyway. It's an Edelbrock. It runs fine. It's very reliable. It just seems like a dog to me. Intake manifold on there, it's an old Whelan, and I don't know if it was made in the USA or not. I remember when he got it, it was pretty cheap. But everything works, and there's a part of me that has been reluctant to make a lot of change on this car because it has a lot of sentimental value. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're looking at on this car, my father did. This wasn't me. This wasn't just someone I didn't know. I just bought the car or something like that. This was stuff that my father wrenched on and put together. And some of it I'm not happy with. It's not the way I would have done it. You got to understand with my father, he was born in the Depression. He was a teen in the 50s. He worked in a junkyard. He was in a gang in the 50s, I found out. So he just slapped together what he could find, and that was good. Not exactly the way I do things. I'm all for get it together and get it running and have fun, but also want it to be safe and be a little bit more reliable. And so some of these things that I'm looking at, you got to understand, I continue to debate back and forth. Do I change it? Is it that important? So we'll just kind of go through what I'd like to do or what I think I should do. And you can drop in the comments below. What would you do? What would you do in this situation? Is it that important? Should I make it completely mine? I've got to retain some of it. I absolutely do. But there's things that really do bother me. Like the paint on it, I'm fine with the colors, but the finish on it is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, it is very orange peely. It was painted in a dusty, dark garage, and you look down the sides. I mean, it's just, Dad didn't do full-on metal repair. The kind of guy that just, cover it with plastic. This thing probably has a lot of plastic in it. In fact, why don't we take a look inside the car, and then we'll get under the car and see what I'm talking about. How about we take a look on the inside of the car here next? So back in the mid-'80s, my father had all the upholstery redone in this car. It was done by Hagee's Upholstery, which used to be in downtown New York. They also are the ones I bought my 64 Impala from. But as you can see in here, we have 4-speed on the floor. The tack on the steering column, I added that, and it's there for decoration. It does not work, but I picked it up at a flea market for dirt cheap, and I thought it looked pretty cool. So there it is. It does have an original steering wheel, so it's pretty big, and it always feels weird for me to get into this with that big steering wheel, but I like it that way. I'm going to keep it like that. Dad put some sort of aftermarket stereo in here. I think it's like retro sound or some. It pretty much sounds horrible. It's worthless. Headliner's in excellent shape. Again, he had all this done and reupholstered. He had it all done in vinyl. That's what he wanted. He told him this is the exact pattern he wanted and the colors he wanted it in. So it has a J.C. Whitney carpet in it. I did redo this heater box some time back. When I inherited the car back in about 2013, My father had bypassed the heater core, and it was just a valve inside the heater box that I had to swap out. Actually, it was just the hose actually going to it. So, but I wound up replacing the valve while I was in there. And also, I got the heater duct system, which is this real long metal octopus-looking thing up under the dash. All that stuff had been ripped out by Ed when he used to drag race the car. So I found one on eBay and put it back in. So we actually had defrost. I remember when I was a teenager driving this car to high school in the wintertime, and I'd have to carry a rag and a spray bottle because I had to keep spraying down the inside of the windshield and wiping it down because it kept fogging up. But that's pretty much the interior. Nothing power in here, no power windows or anything, stuff like that. There you can see the old speakers back there, probably some cheap things my father found or came with the stereo system. But again, this stereo system in here sounds horrible and doesn't matter to me because I don't usually play radios when I'm driving classic cars. There's been some sort of sealant that was used here at some point by somebody, and it continues to melt. And it runs down the window frame and goes behind the door panel, coming out at the armrest onto the carpet. I have no idea what that stuff is. At some point, I got to get that out of there because it is making a mess of things. All right. Let's take a look under the car. I just wanted to point out that this has these stone guards on them. The owner back in 75, Ed, he had gotten these from Luck and Ball Chevy. These were new old stock. Now, the one on the opposite side has been replaced, and that was because when I was a teenager, I was going through the drive-thru of Burger King, and I scraped the curb and ruined it. So my father had to buy a repop and put on the other side. But there you go. So again, this is a stock rear. It's not the posi that was in it when it was a drag car. Dad wound up selling that. He put a different rear in it. And then in the 80s, when I was a teenager driving the car, I was being stupid and doing some high rev hole shots and literally tore most of the teeth off the ring gear. So this is a replacement rear that's since he had done the work, and that was because of me. So this rear pumpkin has been in, or this rear gear set has been in here since about 85, I think is when I did that. Has an original tank in it, which has the drain plug, which is kind of cool. It has a sending unit that works sometimes and sometimes doesn't. So basically, I just try to keep this tank topped off. And it's always been that way. Dad has been through multiple sending units and wires, and I got to look at it because, again, my father did it, and who knows where he did things. I don't know if he put a whole new wire in or not. He might have just spliced some places. Looking up there, I see some putty sticking through a bunch of holes. That was probably where the electric pump was mounted in the trunk back when it was a dry car. So Dad, instead of filling it in with metal, instead used body putty. That's nice, so I probably should fix that. Shocks are in the stock location, going through the floor. What else we had? We got some ugly exhaust under here. And this is one of those things I really would like to replace. This, I hate. This is just horrible. I mean, it's held up. It's done its thing. It's just horrible. And I know he wasn't a fan of it either. He wanted to put true stainless steel duals on this. He would go to the swap meets, and he would talk to different dealers, and they'd all say, oh, yeah, we have that, but we don't have it at the show. We'd have to send it to you, and my father was old school. If he had the cash, he wanted the part. He did not want someone on a promise that they were going to ship it, so that never happened. Got glass packs on it. I am not a fan of glass packs, but my father thought those were the coolest thing. But again, he was a teen of the 50s, so that was norm. The traction bars, I put them on there. I think I got these from J.C. Whitney back in the 80s. And it's got a nice bend to it. So, yeah, apparently I put a little bit of stress on those. That was probably when I was doing hole shots and bent that and snapped those and tore all those teeth off that ring gear. So, there you go. Moving forward, we got a 4-speed Saginaw. Got some writing on here. I can't quite make out. It looks like December or something of 89, maybe. I believe this was out of a Camaro is what this was. Dad bought this at Carlisle many, many years ago. And it works fine. I mean, there's no issues with it. I mean, obviously it's not heavy duty. It's cast iron, so it's heavy. But, you know, so is the bell housing. I mean, that's massive old cast iron, because what Dad's got in here is the correct one for 55, because it has the front engine mounts. It relies on these rear mounts on the bell housing, and Dad put chain on it. Probably something he learned from back in the day. That was probably a good idea. But originally this stuff was, I don't know how well you can see it. That is horrible. I remember my dad saying he had to weld these pieces back onto the frame because they were cut off, because it had the big block in it. And now I see that there is some weld, and then there's a bolted piece of metal on there. Yeah, okay, we're going to need to fix that. Make that, oh my God, Dad, did you really do that? Yeah, that's going to have to be fixed. See, that's what it's supposed to look like. And that's what Dad did. Yeah, it's got some nasty booger weld on there. All right, well, we're going to fix that at some point. Moving on, yes, we have a yellow starter. I think it was Excel. I remember Dad buying that at a swap meet because it was supposed to be high torque. Tire rods. I thought all this stuff was redone. Maybe it's not, because it is pretty ugly looking. And all that wet is probably coming from the steering box up there. It has an original steering box in it. I may end up at some point switching that as well. Get something that's a little bit better. But it's hard to put headers on these when they're a manual because of the linkage and the way the bell housing is set up. So we'll have to see what I end up doing. I'm not a fan of those log manifolds. Here you can see we've replaced the brake hoses, upper and I think lower ball joints were replaced. I know all the A-arm bushings were replaced. It might have new shocks on it too, so that's good. But gives you a bit of an idea of what's going on with this car, where things are at. Now, as far as rust is concerned, we'll take a look at the inner rocker. And I think that might be, oh yeah, that's a little weak. Of course, that don't look so good. That's a nice hole in there. Oh, look at that. That floor support's doing a lot of work for me. Like a lot of body filler sticking through that hole. So got a couple things to do there. I'm sure the other side isn't any better. Nope, not at all. Okay, so that's underneath the car. And as you can see, I got a number of things I really should do. In fact, I should probably start putting together a list of things that I need to do. And don't expect immediate videos on doing work on this. I am really focused on getting my Life 75 Nova done and painted this spring. I have all the metal work done on the car, and I'll do an updated video on that hopefully within the next few weeks here. That's why I moved the 55 from the other garage, because the other space is where I'm going to be making a lot of dust and dirt, sanding, stripping all the old paint off that Nova. But the rust is all gone. So now it's just a matter of getting into the fine body work. So what I may end up doing is going over this one to kind of put together my wish list of things that will be what I'll be looking for at all the swap meets this year. So maybe sometime late spring or during the summer, I may end up doing some more work on the 55 if you guys like to see that. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was kind of cool to see the old 55. Again, this car was my father's. I inherited it back in 2013. I've pretty much kept a lot of it the way that he had it. There's a lot of things that still bother me about it, but on the other hand, it brings back a lot of memories, and I hate to change much on it. But I think I do have some safety things that I really need to take care of here, like welding parts of the frame really needs to be taken care of. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. If you want notifications when a new video comes out, if you hit the bell, then that way you'll get notifications. Remember, to subscribe doesn't cost you anything, doesn't mean anything else other than you will know when a new video comes out. And it helps me when you subscribe as well. I'm so close to 2,000 subscribers. That's awesome. I really appreciate all you that have hung out there, that have stayed with me through all this, even when I go a month or two without posting any content. There'll be a lot of swap meets coming up soon, so there'll be a lot more content on its way. As always, thanks guys for watching.